Hi everyone, this is Lauren Steiner with the Robust Opposition, and I am here in my own living room at a fundraiser for Gayle McLaughlin. And Jimmy Dore is going to be joining us soon. We've got about 50 people here in my living room and my outside ready to contribute to Gayle McLaughlin, who is running for Lieutenant Governor here in California. She's the former Green Party mayor of Richmond, and she started the Richmond Progressive Alliance. And they were able to beat back Chevron in that community despite being outspent 20-1. He's been under siege this week.
A conspiracy theorist who are... I'm against the war, so that's a conspiracy.
Yeah.
You know, I always like to say, when I first got started doing the news, it was with KPFK, and they were very generous, and they've always been very supportive of me over there. And then I hooked up with Cenk Uygur and the Young Turks when he had his show over at Current TV, and then they got bought by Al Jazeera. And what I always like to say, the difference between Al Jazeera and CNN is that CNN shows you when the bombs take off, and Al Jazeera shows you when they land. Yeah. So they'll never show you, Brian Williams will nut in his pants at a missile launch. But he never sees the carnage afterwards, and so neither do we. So, but I love Brian Williams. He is my favorite suit model on TV. There's no one looks better in a suit than Brian. And he just he leans in. He's fantastic. But it is great to be here, and I'm really thrilled that Gayle invited me to be here because her story is so inspiring. You know, one of the things about being anti-establishment is that you have few victories in life. She's a winner. And she beat the biggest of the biggest, and that's just exciting.
First thing I want to say is that this is Earth Day. I don't know if you guys remember 1970, which was the first Earth Day. And I was at the first Earth Day. I don't remember what it was, but I consider myself an environmentalist. I've been an environmentalist ever since, and we have only seen things go from bad to worse in this country. We've lost 50% of our species. We have an administration in power right now where the president thinks that climate change is a hoax foisted on us by the Chinese. He's got an EPA administrator, Scott Pruitt, who used to sue the EPA and is basically in the process of dismantling everything that the EPA has ever, every regulation that the EPA has ever put forth. Even Obama, who was the fracker-in-chief, he quadrupled fracking, he actually had some good regulations. And right now, Pruitt is trying to get rid of all of them. So I would like each your own take on Earth Day today. What do you want to share with the people?
Go ahead.
All right, yeah. So, with today being Earth Day, it's very, very important because, as Bernie Sanders says, we're in a planet emergency. You know, this is not just a crisis anymore, it's an emergency. And, having fought Chevron and, been a part of our movement in Richmond, fighting back this big oil giant, we really were on the front lines, understanding that not only is our planet in crisis, Chevron is the largest greenhouse gas emitter in the state of California, the Chevron refinery in Richmond, but also we have the community living on the fence line of Chevron, and it's largely people of color, as is the case often with refineries all over California and everywhere. And the health problems that people live with based on living in the shadow of an oil refinery is something that we were very aware of, and we worked hard to push back and limit their pollution in Chevron. We have a lot more work to do, and we have a lot of good things, as much as we push back on the bad things, like the big bad oil companies that need to understand that we, the people, are going to save our people's planet, we also lift up the good environmental things, like being a part of a community choice energy program. We renovated our parks in Richmond. We cleaned up our creeks. We have community gardens up and down this beautiful greenway we have. So I guess my message on Earth Day is to let's keep doing the good fight, pushing back on these oil companies that are putting us all into this threatening place for not only ourselves but our children and grandchildren. But let's also do all the good things that make our life special and have all kinds of quality involvement for ourselves and our families.
The only thing, well, I can't top that, so I should have went first. But the thing I know about Earth Day or the starting of the EPA is how it got started. There was some New York Times reporters who happened to be in Ohio, and they saw the Cuyahoga River caught on fire. And that wasn't a unique thing. It would happen a lot. Rivers would catch on fire a lot. But they just didn't see it all the time, and it didn't get reported in the New York Times. So just luckily, they got reported, and that. We got Nixon to start the EPA, right? So things can really happen, and it shows it comes from the grassroots, and it comes up that way. And if there's anybody who knows about grassroots politics, it's Gayle. Right?
My next question is about an impending war over Syria, which could possibly turn into a war with Russia, which could possibly turn into World War III. Now, I know as Lieutenant Governor, you're not really going to be able to do very much about that, but, those of us in independent media who have been trying to tell the people that it is not what it seems, it's not what the mainstream media is telling us, there's starting to be pushback right now. And I did a live stream interview yesterday, a conversation with Jamarl Thomas, talking about how now even the left, like Democracy Now!, like The Intercept, like Pacifica Radio, even they are starting to talk about Assad. Now, calling us Assad apologists. Now, okay, just because we are, not talking about all the horrible things Assad has done doesn't mean we don't think he's a horrible guy, but what we're doing is we're putting our focus on the fact that they're not telling us the real truth about whether he was bombing his own people. This is the third time and what do they do? CNN Money does an investigative report in which they call our friend Jimmy Dore right here a conspiracy theorist on their and they put him in the same league with Alex Jones and InfoWars, with the neo-Nazis and the pedophiles. So Jimmy,
what I think was interesting about that article is they managed to get a quote from the Nazi, but somehow they didn't get a quote from me. Makes me think like they almost didn't want to talk to me. And nor will they defend their piece either. If you've noticed on Twitter and Facebook and what have you, I've been asking those authors of that article to please defend it and say what makes me an extremist or a conspiracy theorist. I'm actually debunking the conspiracy that Assad is somehow gassing his own people on the brink of victory. The only thing that would draw the superpower in. He's inexplicably doing that, and not only that, but I pointed it out that Rand Paul made the same case on CNN. So why is CNN providing a platform for conspiracy theorists? And I'm going to call ExxonMobil and tell them not to advertise on CNN anymore.
Carlson and Jeffrey Sachs.
Oh, so Jeffrey Sachs. So Jeffrey Sachs is University of Columbia professor who went on Columbia University, did I say it backwards? And he was on MSNBC, and I don't know how that happened, but he accidentally told the truth about the Syrian war. And how he started it, how the United States... On Morning Joe Ball, he said that we started it with the CIA 7 years ago. And he said at that time, when Barack Obama said we need to have regime change, which they've been saying since about 1963, by the way. And I have Christiane Amanpour saying it to Assad in 2006. I have a videotape of her saying that, people are calling for regime change. And that was in 2006. That was before any gas attacks or anything. So this has nothing to do with helping people, because if we really cared about helping people, we would stop refueling the Saudi planes that are committing a genocide.
Call out my own congressman, Ted Lieu, who used to be very good on this issue. He actually had a bill that said we should not fund Saudi Arabia until they stop their war crimes in Yemen. That was before Trump got elected. Since Trump got elected, he's become the anti-tweeter in chief. All he ever does is tweet against Trump, tweet against Putin, tweet against Jared Kushner, and go on the cable news shows. He's trying to create a career for himself. When Bernie Sanders and Mike Lee authored that bill that was very similar to Ted Lieu's bill, he didn't say one word, crickets, okay? So basically the entire Democratic Party and the stenographers in the mainstream media have all joined together in trying to voice these narratives, and they're calling those of us on the left who question it conspiracy theorists and extremists. Now, Gayle, I want to ask you...
Can I just make a comment on that?
Yes.
Just quickly. So, you're right, Lauren, that the lieutenant governor position, focuses on the state. But, just like I did when I was in mayor, which focused on a city, I always tried to draw the links to the bigger picture, to the global picture, because we are a global family. And I brought forward resolutions, against the war in Iraq, against potential war with Iran. And I can do the same thing, and I will do the same thing with this lieutenant governor's seat. We can draw the connections with the fact that our country shouldn't be bombing Syria, and that and that all these lies that are being put out there that are. And like Jimmy said, that we don't see the carnage that is affected. They tell us that they're dropping the bombs, but they don't show us the pain and suffering that is happening. So we can do that. We could use this level, this state level seat, to draw the links to the big global pictures.
Question about what California can do, because as people may or may not know, the lieutenant governor sits on 3 different boards. Do you want to list those boards?
Well, there's a few. There's quite a few. There's the State Lands Commission, the Coastal Commission, the UC Board of Regents, the California State University Board of Trustees, the Economic Development Commission. There's various. There's the STEM Research Commission. So there's a few more as well, but you might have in mind.
So my point was going to be this, okay? Gavin Newsom, it was just reported in the news that the 3 main commissions, he went to less than 50% of the meetings. So that's pretty bad.
Yeah, I saw that article.
Right now, and I'm going to say again what I said the last time Gayle was here, that I wish she was running for governor, because I don't think we have any really great choices for governor right now. And the Board of Regents, I remember from being in the Occupy movement when they had Occupy the Regents. And one of the things they were trying to do, the Occupy movement up there, was get them to stop investing with the big banks that had, torpedoed our economy. And so we could also get these, the regents, perhaps, to not, look, who made money after these bombings? Raytheon. Raytheon's stock shot up through the roof, because that's who makes money, the military-industrial intelligence complex. So if you had an ability to sit on the board of the regents and talk about their investment strategies, that could be
Absolutely, yeah. To talk about divesting from these military firms.
Yeah.
And big banks. These are all things that we can do together. I mean, I will be one of various seats on this board, but I was a singular RPA member at one time on the city council. And with the community support and mobilizing, we could pressure the other members of the board. And that's what we'll need to do. Student groups and community groups can come to these meetings. And I'll speak from my seat. You'll all speak from the public podium. We'll be shoulder to shoulder.
So, I want to switch gears a little bit and go into my Barbara Walters. My Barbara Walters style interviewing and talk about a little bit about the personal background of both of you, because it just happens to be that both of you grew up in Chicago.
Oh.
And I
Watch as you grow. Southwest.
Southwest side. Okay, Northwest, Southwest. Your Sox fan?
No, I was actually a Cubs fan because when I was a kid, this Chicago White Sox went on pay TV, on TV. I don't know if you remember that. They would show. Anyway, and we were poor, so my dad's not going to pay for sport. So I became a Cubs fan because it was on TV. So I grew up. How big was your family?
I have 4 sisters, 5 girls in our family, no brothers, so 7 in our family.
Oh, okay. So I was 12 kids.
Oh, wow.
People always say, they go, wow, you learn a lot about life growing up in a big family. And you do, Gayle, but I think the biggest thing I learned is I'm easily replaced. Like, I knew if I died, it wasn't going to put a big dent in my family's plans. You know? I can't imagine my mom sitting around, oh no, Jimmy's dead. What am I going to do now with just the 11? How do you fill the empty 1/12 of your heart?
want to ask you both, is there anything particular to growing up in Chicago? We know Mayor Daley, now we've got Rahm Emanuel, we've got the wonderful Karen Lewis, who's the head of the teachers union there, who almost pulled it off. But Chicago is its own kind of place. And I'm just reading right now The Dark Side of Camelot, Cy Hersh's book about JFK. And one of the things that he talks about is how JFK stole the election from Nixon in 1960, and how he did that was through the Teamsters and the Mafia in...
You didn't do the DNC?
And also, by the way, JFK had high-class call girls going into the White House every night of the week when Jackie wasn't there. And every time he went out on location, he had venereal disease for over 30 years, that he was having unprotected sex with these women, not telling them. And his father was an illegal bootlegger who worked with the Mafia who got him the election. So, by the way, all these 3 things are what Donald Trump is being accused of. I'm no fan of Donald Trump, but, you know, let's talk about JFK. Or let's not talk about JFK. Not talk about JFK.
Let's talk about
And I know I'm going to be accused by the left of whataboutism right now. But let me ask you, what do you think both of you should... First of all, two questions in one. Did growing up in Chicago have anything to do with your political philosophies that you have now? And second of all, talk a little bit about your family, your parents, the experiences that planted the seeds for you to become as political as you both are now.
Okay, all right. So, I definitely, growing up in Chicago had a lot to do with the political person that I've become. When I was a young teenager, in 1968, when the Democratic National Convention was being held in Chicago, and Mayor Daley gave the order to, really basically shoot to kill, and beating over the heads of beating the heads of protesters against the Vietnam War. I came home one day and my mother was staring at the TV, seeing these young students getting their heads beat with these clubs, and she was like, just outraged. She couldn't believe her eyes, and she just kept saying, look at what they're doing, look at what they're doing, because she felt that as if it were her own kids. She had myself and 2 younger teens still at home, and so she was very, very aware of the fact that this harm was happening to kids her kids' age, and that really made an impression on me because it made it clear to me that there were some things worth fighting for and worth speaking your mind about. That stuck with me. And another quick story is, Chicago has a lot of industry, factories. My grandmother worked in factories. Actually, my mother did too when she was younger. And the factory used to flood, and there would be water up to their ankles that my grandmother would have to, mainly my grandmother would have to work in. And so she, this 4', 11-inch petite woman, she decided she was going to Chicago City Hall and complain. And she did, and she got it to change. Her employer had to that's a lesson, I think, to all of us. We don't want the water to raise up to our necks, before we do something. We all can change things, so, yeah.
When my earliest political memory is when Mayor Daley died, and then, and by the way, so in my house growing up, I tell the story that we had a bar in our basement where we didn't have a bookshelf, which is true, and we're big readers, and for my dad, for his birthday, I'll never forget, someone one year gave him a book. And it was called Clouds, and it was about Richard J. Daley. That's a famous book. And I knew whoever gave him that book didn't know my dad very well, because if they did, they knew he was never going to read that book, nor did he have any place to put it. So he literally put it up in the top shelf in his closet in his room, and every once in a while I would walk past his room, and the closet door would be open, and I'd be like, oh, there's the book. So after Mayor Daley died, Mayor Michael Blandick became the mayor, and he was a very ineffective Irishman. And so what happened was we had a blizzard, and I think it was in 1977, and which was right after he died. There was a blizzard, and it was the biggest blizzard ever, right? So literally I was ice skating on the streets in front of our house and around the park. On the streets, we would ice skate in the street because they couldn't plow. There was so much snow, they didn't get to our neighborhood to plow it for like a month. And no one could park their cars or move their cars, and people were hiring private tow trucks to come plow their streets and stuff because there was no city services that could handle this. And so what happened, people were really upset that they weren't having their needs met by their city government. And so that's when Jane Burns decided to run against Michael Blandick. They were all part of this Democratic machine. And so what happened was we ended up getting Harold Washington as our mayor, and the joke that went around that time is, what do you get when 2 Irishmen screw each other? You get a black mayor. And so we got Harold Washington as our mayor, and where I grew up on the Southwest Side, which was solid Democrat, I mean, there was never a Republican ever. It turns out everybody in my neighborhood was a Republican that year, and they voted for Bernie Epton, and they didn't want a black mayor, but we got him anyway, and he turned out to be a good mayor. And even the racists in my neighborhood would admit years later that he brought city services to them. And so that was my first kind of taste of when people are upset with the establishment, anything can happen. And guess what just happened in 2016? It's the exact same thing, right? So people wanted someone to meet their needs, and unfortunately we got someone who's not going to meet their needs, Donald Trump. But that actually is a springboard for progressives right now. The Democratic Party just can't stop shitting on progressives. They just can't stop trying to cheat us and screw us out of everything. And they're doing it right now to Stephen Jaffe and up and down the line. They're
And
rigging the
Diaz
game.
Prada, who's right here.
The game is rigged. So they don't know what they're doing with the endorsements and how many delegates you have to get. Then they move the goalpost at the last minute.
Yeah.
And so that's why I'm so glad that Gayle's running the way she's running. And I think I think it's going to make a big difference. And if there's anybody who can make a big difference that way, it's Gayle. That's what
Thank you so much, Jimmy. Yeah, it's really true that building this big progressive tent is what it's all about. So, people that are Greens, people Peace and Freedom, people who are NPP like me, no party preference, and those progressive Democrats who are still, they're doing this good fight in the Democratic Party, which needs to happen.
Yes.
But it's really, we have to recognize that both parties are controlled by corporations. And build an independent movement, and so that's what I'm.
Both parties?
Yes.
Somebody should tell Jack
So the news today is Hillary's super PAC. What's it called? Onward Together. Hillary's super PAC is just given $1.2 million. Or no, the DNC. I'm sorry, I got it backwards. The DNC gave $1.2 million to Hillary's super PAC for list rental. Okay, so this is.
She needs the money. Come on. She's got a pool to heat in her second house.
I mean, the DNC already was supposed to be giving the money to the state parties. The state parties are bereft of money. They have no money. And she took it the first time. That was actually Politico. We got to hand it to Politico. They did the first reporting on that, how the money kind of went through the DNC and then back right out to Hillary's campaign. So now they're giving her more money for the list rental and therefore not giving any money to the state parties. So they've learned nothing from the campaign. We're waiting on now what they're going to do about the superdelegates. The committee apparently had some good recommendations, and now the Rules and Bylaws Committee are going to finally vote on it. But then it's got to go before the entire, DNC. And I've been skeptical, thinking like, are any of these lobbyists going to vote themselves out of office? Probably not, right? So, and then we see someone great like Amber Patel, who's right here. Who ends up coming in third or fourth, I'm not sure, I found this out tonight, a 19-year-old kid who's the Republican. So Jesse Gabriel, who had the money from the charter schools, he comes in first, and this 19-year-old kid with no experience, no platform, no nothing, just because he's got an R by his name, comes in second. So, right? So, all of us who are here, including Jimmy, to support Anchor, we got to double up our efforts for June. But still, it's just like the fix is in. It's so discouraging. And I would like to ask both of you how you feel about when you hear this kind of news after news after news about the rigging of everything. How you keep going on. What motivates you to continue?
Yeah. Well, what motivates me is the fact that we're in these urgent times, and the fact that so many people are really getting into this organizing mode. That's the silver lining of this horrendous Trump administration. I think people have recognized there's no more, sitting on the sidelines. They're ready to do something because it's so much necessary. It's so much needed. So these are times that are ripe for organizing, and that's what really propels me to go forward. And I'll tell you what else propels me. When I see how all the billboards, around California, up and down the state, when I see the television ads for these big corporations, when you go into stores and purchase something and you see the rising prices, when you see what your rent is going up to and the cost of houses, you know that corporations, big banks, these big money entities have a grip on our lives. It's not only that they have a grip on these corporate-funded office holders and candidates, which they do. These candidates and office holders serve as an intermediary for the corporations and do their dirty work sometimes for them. But they have a grip on our lives by the fact that they just bombard us with all their ads and with the products they sell us. So when I see that, I realize how much we have to do to shake off this corporate control. And we can do it. And we have to keep doing it. There is no time like the present. We have to take one step at a time. It's always darkest before the dawn, but each step we take, we're getting closer to the sun that's coming up in the sky, and that's what keeps me going, taking those steps forwards.
What keeps you going?
Everything is so big, between the parties, between the mainstream media, between the corporations, between the DNC. We keep just getting knocked down. What keeps you going?
What keeps me going is a Vicodin and Coca-Cola. It's like a warm blanket. What keeps me going is people like Gayle, and that's no joke. And when I meet people like this in this room, and when I do live shows and I get to meet people, and people are thirsty for the truth.
Yes.
People are thirsty for people who will speak to their needs and not gaslight them. And so that's what keeps me going, is I know that most of the people out there want to have a government that works for them, and it is super possible.
Yes.
Right? I mean, it was just in my lifetime, there was free college in California. There was. My mother-in-law became a teacher because she got to go to college for free, and then because she was in a union, she was able to have a decent life and have a retirement right now. So, what keeps me going is I can remember it wasn't that long ago that we had our head on straight. It's just because I think the biggest detriment Bill Clinton did, there was many, but it was the Telecommunications Act. And so we just lived through this videotape going around about Sinclair Media. But I don't know if you saw Ed Schultz talk about the Comcast Media, and they're just as horrible, right? And the problem isn't Sinclair Media. The problem is the corporate Democrats who deregulated the media. So we had to. They did things that Ronald Reagan could only dream of doing, right? Like NAFTA, deregulate the banks, gut welfare, and the Telecommunications Act. So those are, it takes a wolf in sheep's clothing to get stuff like that done. Barack Obama opened the Arctic to drilling twice. Whenever Shell Oil asked, he said okay. So those are the things, so what keeps me going is meeting people like this, seeing people like Gayle, and her track record of getting things done.
To how I introduced Gayle. She is actually a proven commodity. She has gotten things done as mayor of Richmond, as a member of the Richmond City Council, as a member of the Richmond Progressive Alliance, and even just in her campaign, going up and down the state, organizing local progressive alliances. Okay, this has been another live edition of the Robust Opposition. Please share this video. Please donate to Gayle. Please subscribe to Jimmy Dore. And please keep fighting.